is media criticism anyway? Why everyone gotta be so critical? Let's get into it. Welcome to Think Thing. When I started this channel, the idea was that I would do these little video essays about whatever it was that was on my mind at any given time, and I assumed that this would include subjects that I am generally prone to think about. So TV and movies, science, culture, politics, food, etc. In practice, though, as I look back at the bulk of videos I've made so far, it's clear that media criticism of one sort or another is the real bread and butter of the channel. Whether I'm talking about Jane Austen adaptations, sci-fi and fantasy TV, or long-lost gems. In the comments, I have occasionally found myself defending the very notion of media criticism, like I'm the asshole for deciding to share my opinions about things in the first place. So I wanted to talk about this a little bit and try and articulate why I think looking at the media that we consume through a critical lens is worthwhile, and also what my personal approach is to doing that, because not all media criticism is the same. First off, when I say criticism or critical lens, I don't mean critical in its negative sense, necessarily. I can love and praise a film and give it 5 out of 5 stars, and if I'm also doing any kind of a cultural read on the film or unpacking its meaning at all, that's still engaging in criticism. I'm using the term in its more academic sense, though I make no claims of being an actual academic myself.
I'm not the smartest guy in the world. Okay?
As to the question of why I feel the need to read into the meaning of these bits of media that are mostly meant to be entertainment, well, I do it because it's fun. Back when I used to go out to the movies on a more regular basis, half the fun was meeting up for coffee afterwards and talking about the film we'd just seen. This is that, but on YouTube, and you have to bring your own coffee. Some of what I'm doing on this channel takes the form of movie reviews. That is, I just watched a movie or a TV show and I want to tell you what I thought about it. Broadly speaking, there are two distinct approaches to reviewing a film or other piece of media. There's the Siskel and Ebert approach and the academic approach. The Siskel and Ebert approach is straightforward enough and mainly boils down to a thumbs up or thumbs down bit of advice for moviegoers. Should I spend my money on this film or not?
Come on, band together, people. Let's overthrow the country.
Protestants, people who sort of want a religion. Let's stick together. The Catholics and the fucking Jews, we go back a few years together.
I'll just add as a quick aside that I think pigeonholing Roger Ebert into merely being this sort of critic isn't really fair, as his film writing was often deeper and more thoughtful than that. But he is also responsible, probably more than any other single person, for the idea that film reviews are just consumer beware warnings in the first place. By contrast, the academic approach isn't really offering advice so much as looking at the film through different critical lenses. This notion of viewing a piece of media through a critical or cultural lens is something that some commenters have taken umbrage with. Why do I feel like that's necessary? Why do I have to inject my woke politics into art or whatever? Any critical evaluation of a given work is made through a cultural lens of one sort or another, whether intentional or not. Literally every word you or I choose to share that evaluates Rings of Power or The Smurfs or Kafka's The Trial or that Colgate commercial I just saw is done through our own relative cultural filters, whether we're aware of them or not. The work we're talking about exists in the context of the rest of the world, and so do we. There's no sterile vacuum within which we can objectively evaluate art. Academic criticism is only different from you or me yammering on about a movie or a show insofar as it acknowledges these biases and is a bit more intentional about how the critics approach the works they're evaluating. So you wind up with fields of critical theory that speak to these various lenses, like postmodernism or structuralism, semiotics, feminist, queer, or Marxist criticism, postcolonialism, etc. These are the spheres of critical thought that are identified by academia, but you have your own set of lenses that you bring with you too when you make value judgments about art. You just don't talk about them as explicitly. Asking why critics look at art through cultural lenses is a little like asking why you have to get wet when you go swimming. It's just part of the deal whether you like it or not. Importantly, this approach has almost nothing to do with whether a film is good or not. It's about scratching the surface and getting a look at what's underneath. This sort of writing can seem dry and far-fetched at times to folks who are not already used to thinking in those terms, but it's also where some of the most interesting and juicy thinking happens about our media landscape. My own approach to this is actually neither the Siskel and Ebert approach nor the academic approach, or rather it's a combination of them both. I'm not an academic, but I appreciate a deep dive into the cultural melange as much as anyone. And make no mistake, Everything has subtext. Everything is political. The dumbest, schlockiest, most purely made-for-entertainment value pablum
Bazinga!
can be unpacked and read into in terms of its meaning. That the filmmaker never intended the film to mean what a given critic says about it is actually irrelevant. Movies are made inside a cultural context, and they exist in the real world, and they are in conversation with other films and art and commerce and the rest of the culture that they're born from, whether the filmmaker likes it or not. There's just no escaping that. As I said, art doesn't exist in a vacuum. And it's a tragically common mistake to ascribe intent to the artist when reading into a work. There's a danger of falling down the Room 237 rabbit hole, wherein you give Stanley Kubrick the superhuman ability to make every inch of the frame include a specific intended reference or a hidden message. It's film interpretation via conspiracy theory. By the way, there's a surefire way to completely disabuse someone of this type of hyper-nerdy author worship, where every prop and camera shake and out-of-place strand of hair is seen as an intentional choice by the genius filmmaker. Just spend some time on a film set. You will very quickly discover that the vast majority of creative decisions on a set are made for practical reasons, usually related to solving a problem or cost savings. Occam's razor is a valuable tool here. Is the Red Book sitting on the Overlook Hotel manager's desk in the Jack Torrance interview scene in The Shining a specific Carl Jung book placed there intentionally by Kubrick as a subtle and esoteric reference that somehow explains all of the film's supernatural horrors and Jack Torrance's descent into madness to the 0.03% of viewers who might pick up on the reference? Or is it just a common Red Book about hotel and motel guest services placed there by an overworked set dresser who was given the job to make the set a realistic hotel manager's office? The answer is always going to be the simplest one. Don't ascribe genius intent to that which can be explained by the chaotic and time-crunched decisions made on a working film set. The same fallacy is responsible for many comment section fights about media. If a critic suggests, for example, that the fantastical creatures in J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings legendarium can be viewed through a lens of modern race politics, you can expect a pile-on from fans, angry that the critic has somehow called Tolkien a racist. But again, reading what a work says doesn't necessarily say anything about what the author of the work intended. Even in the case where the author has explicitly said, "No, that's not what I meant, you're wrong."
Many people apply the ring to particularly the nuclear bomb, don't they? I think that was in my mind, is that the whole thing is only an allegory of it. But it isn't.
The critical read is no less valid. The work exists on its own, independent of the author. All that matters is how it makes people think and feel. Look at literally anything Alfred Hitchcock ever said in response to the overwhelming amount of film theorists who wrote about his work. Are all those critics just wrong because Hitch disagreed? Or are they maybe privy to some aspects of his work that he himself was not? If, for example, a critic writes about Freudian themes in the films of Alfred Hitchcock, and Hitchcock says,
"The whole thing is a confounded lie."
I'm sorry, Hitch, but I've seen Psycho and Vertigo, and the critics are kind of onto something there. But that doesn't necessarily say anything about Hitchcock himself, who may or may not have had mommy issues.
I suppose it must have all started when I was in my mother's arms at the age of 6 months.
The text is the text. It's there for all to evaluate using whatever criteria they bring to the reading. It's not a conversation between audience and author. It's a conversation between audience and art, which is not to say an author's motivations and intent are unhelpful or uninteresting. Tolkien's post-Lord of the Rings letters shine an invaluable light into the author's thinking that we are very fortunate to have. But not every way a work is interpreted was intended by or could even have been conceived of by the author. There are 8 billion of us. No author could possibly anticipate all the ways their work could be interpreted. So, yeah, when I dig into a film or a show and I talk about its meaning or subtext or what it has to say about this or that, I'm just relating what it made me think of. I'm not making any claims about any artist's intent, and it's all subjective anyway.
You know, that's just like your opinion, man.
And I really do want to engage with people in the comments about this stuff. If you think I'm wrong, please tell me, and please explain why you think so. That's half the fun. But you gotta bring your own coffee. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.